Hey everybody, it is Mike Schumann of the Daily Hoosier here for another episode of the East 17th Street podcast. I am joined once again by Seth Tao, and back after a long time away is the intern Owen Graham. Owen, gonna put you on the spot right away. What the heck have you been doing, man?
I've been everywhere. I was with the American Junior Golf Association. I served as a communications intern with them. Um, kind of stayed around the southeast area, Florida, Georgia area. Went up to the Carolinas and Maryland, but been just about everywhere this summer. But I'm glad to be back in Bloomington, back home, and ready to get straight into football season. Not a lot of downtime. Got like 7 days before I came back into the first game. So staying busy, but all excitement here.
And we're going to continue to put you on the spot. Your first episode is predicting the 2025 IU football season. We're going game by game today, just like we did last year. And hopefully, guys, we do a little bit better than we did last year. This crew was all 7-5 last year for the regular season prediction. So quite a bit of ways off. I remarked to Seth yesterday, I'm afraid there might be some overcorrection risks going the other way with these predictions, but we'll see as we get into it. So let's do that. And as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, we've got Memorial Stadium pictured here. That is the trend for the start of the season as Indiana plays their first 4 games at the friendly confines of their home venue. Starting this Saturday, we're recording on August 28th, Thursday morning, and Saturday, August 30th, they kick off the season against Old Dominion at 2:30 p.m. Eastern on FS1. And just a little bit of background on Old Dominion. Their FPI ranking on ESPN is number 79, SP Plus number 103. Indiana's a 23.5-point favorite directionally, give or take a point in this game. We'll continue to put you on the spot, Owen. What's your outlook for Saturday?
Go for it. Put me on the spot all you want. I miss talking about Indiana football. Yeah, I don't have a lot of problems here for Indiana. Only thing I guess not necessarily worries me, but something I could see happening is just a little bit of time for Fernando Mendoza to get a little comfortable in game action, especially with a good linebacker that they have lined up against him with Jason Henderson. Dealt with some injuries last year, but the season before that, I believe, was pretty high up there, if not led the nation in tackles as a linebacker. So I think that could give Mendoza some issues, but again, it's not anything to be worried about for Indiana fans. I have Indiana coming away comfortably 42-10 to win week 1.
What about you, Seth?
I mean, I agree that I don't think this game should be really difficult for Indiana. I think I put down 37-7 Indiana, and I think that would be a pretty comfortable win for the Hoosiers. I honestly am a little surprised that the point spread is not a little higher towards Indiana. I don't think Indiana is going to have too much trouble here. Expect maybe a little rust coming out. I mean, you can recall, how they looked in week 1 last year against FIU, and it just, they left some stuff out on the field, and it was a little rough around the edges at times, but I still think even if they have some moments like that, this should not be too tough an opener for Indiana.
Yeah, I am of the same view, a little bit impacted by the opener against FIU last year, and just kind of have a sense that this might take a week for Indiana to kind of find a groove. I'm going with 38-17 Indiana. I always kind of use Vegas. I'm not a gambling person myself, but I always use them as my sanity check, so probably a little bit influenced by that. And there's always a little bit of weirdness in week 1, so I won't be surprised if Old Dominion is in the conversation at least, midway through the second quarter, but Indiana pulls away again 38-17 on Saturday. Week 2 is Kennesaw State. The Owls come in as the FPI number 131 and the SP Plus number 131 team. So this is a team right near the bottom of the barrel in terms of computer model rankings. Seth, what do you got for that one?
I think this one's going to be pretty ugly. Ugly in terms of a very lopsided victory. Especially after a week where they'll have some game film and able to correct some things. Give me Indiana 58, Kennesaw 3.
Wow, no love for Dexter Williams. He's not going to find the end zone. Is that what you're telling me?
That is what I'm telling you.
Okay. Owen, do you have a better outlook for former Indiana quarterback Dexter Williams?
Hey, just enjoy your time in Bloomington, because I think you're going to want to get out there as fast as possible. No offense, Dexter. But Seth, I was 1 point off of your prediction. I had 59-3. I might have just did my math wrong in my head, but I was imagining, so it would be 8 touchdowns and a field goal, if I'm doing that math right. It is what I had in my head, with no extra points missed, of course. But
I think Seth has a safety in there.
You got to say that would be fun.
When you said you were 1 point off, I was really hoping you were going 58-4.
You're really doing Dexter Williams a lot of injustice if you're giving him a safety. But yeah, it's just echoing. This shouldn't be any trouble for Indiana. This is probably going to look as close to that Western Illinois game from last year as we get for this season, but Indiana comes away comfortably 59-3.
Yeah, I'm pretty much right there with you guys. Probably not quite as harsh. That seems to be the early trend emerging as you guys are predicting wider margins than me. I've got 52-10 Indiana over Kennesaw State, so I do have them in the end zone at least once. Although I won't predict that it'll be Dexter that gets in there. But all good wishes for him as he rounds out his career and makes his return to Bloomington. So everybody's got 2-0, and I expect with the week 3 opponent being Indiana State, an FCS school, that we're all going to go 3-0. I'll kick that one off. I've got 66-7 Indiana winning that one comfortably, probably getting everybody, including the walk-ons, in that game, guys.
Yep, I'll take this one from you. 63-7, pretty similar score line. This is just going to be Indiana's, tune-up game before they get into conference. They're going to treat it, as Signetti will probably mention, like any other game. And they're probably going to want to, experiment a little bit as well with maybe a little bit of their depth, just like you said, to get their legs warm. But nothing too serious here once again. I got a high school buddy that actually plays for Indiana State, so all good wishes for him. But yeah, the Hoosiers take this one comfortably once again.
I have a sense that Indiana is going to come out a little annoyed that they weren't able to pitch a shutout against Western Illinois last year. So I am going 63-0 Indiana.
Wow, just pure hating on the Sycamores there.
I like that.
Yeah, I think we all can see how that one's going to go, and then it's week 4 that this season really starts to get serious. You've got the number 12 in both the AP and coaches poll, Illinois Fighting Illini, ranked higher than Indiana in both polls. Hoosiers are number 19 and 20 in AP and coaches poll. Illinois not as attractive in the computer models. They're number 37 in FPI, number 19 in SP Plus. So pretty wide discrepancy there. Seth, I'll let you start us off here. I mean, this is the game everybody's got circled. If Illinois is able to win in week 2 at Duke, which is, as we've discussed previously, that's no sure thing. But if they do, this is probably going to be a national top 15 matchup with a lot of eyeballs on Memorial Stadium, which is sold out for this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be, a big game, a lot of eyeballs, regardless of that
Sure.
Duke result. But particularly if Illinois beats Duke, I've been on the record, on multiple occasions saying that I'm not as over the top all in on Illinois as the general public seems to be. I think last season they got up to 10 wins without really being particularly elite at any facet of the game. They were kind of middle of the pack nationally, in terms of offense and defense. And there's something to be said, for a team like that about their coaching to get them to that point. But I think it's led, the people are looking more at the wins, I feel like, from last year than, how they got those wins. Again, this is an Illinois team that needed overtime to beat Purdue last year. I have Indiana winning this game. I picked India, and worth noting also that there is an early point spread on this game available at some local sports books where Indiana's a -3 early, but I'm saying Indiana 34, Illinois 24.
Okay. Owen, what do you got?
Well, Seth, I'm glad I wasn't the only one coming in, because I'm not bought in either. I got to be honest. I think, the number that keeps popping up is the over 70% returning production and returning playing time. But I think, as we've alluded to multiple times over a variety of different podcast episodes, if that returning production isn't giving you something great, then that's not something you really have to take into account a lot of the times. Again, the win total is great, 10-2 on the season. Had a really successful season last year, but again, those results, the overtime at Purdue, like, those things pop up and those things matter. So I'm all in on Indiana on this one, and I kind of have a similar margin to Seth. I have Indiana beating the Illini 35-23, and I don't think Indiana gets to a point where it kind of goes towards that point spread. I think Indiana jumps out to an early lead, maybe slows down around halftime, but it's not enough for the Illini to come back.
Well, let me tell you what makes me nervous about Illinois as we talked about them and researched them over the course of the preseason here. The strength of their team, or at least one of the strengths of their team, to me, appears to be their offensive line. That they have several guys that are probably going to be in the NFL draft conversation. A lot of returning production there that is, highly regarded. And they also have a quarterback who is, talented. He's got arm talent and he's mobile. And that combination reminds me a little bit of Notre Dame last year, with the line, with the ability to, sustain drives, and with a quarterback who can make plays, both with his feet and through the air. So I suspect Brett Bielema is going to come into this game trying to do just that, trying to sustain drives, trying to shorten the game, keep Indiana's offense off the field as much as he can. Now, having said all that, I don't think that they're going to be able to do it enough. I think they'll be able to keep Indiana in check somewhat, but I'm with you guys. I'm not quite buying the Illinois hype coming into this season. I think it's just more of a casual 30,000-foot national observation of they won 10 games. They got a lot of people coming back, so let's go with Illinois. But if this game was in Champaign, I might feel a little bit different. But man, I'm right there with you guys on the score. I've got 34-21 Indiana as the final. So unfortunately, we're all still on the same page, 4-0 to start the season. We'll see here as we turn the page to Indiana's first road game, as we flip the photo there on YouTube, and it's
Great
you can immediately tell the daunting task in front of Indiana as they hit the road for the first time in week 5 to face the Iowa Hawkeyes. Kinnick Stadium seats 70,000 plus. It's one of those stadiums that everybody describes as right on top of the players, with the stands at an angle that just everything is loud and feels right on top of you. It's a great fan base, very passionate. This is an Iowa team that's going to be really engaged for this game. They come in to the season receiving votes in both the AP and the coaches poll. They're number 30 in FPI, number 28 in SP plus. What I think is interesting about Iowa is we'll know a lot more about them when this game starts than we do right now. They play a road game at Iowa State. They play a road game at Rutgers ahead of this IU game. So just exactly who this Iowa team is with a new quarterback and for their sake, hopefully a better offense than what they've had in the past. We'll have a really good sense going into this game. But we can only go off what we know right now. And Seth, what's your take on this game?
This is, this game and the Illinois game are really, to me, the two kind of swing games that are going to really determine what this IU football season is going to be at the end of the day. I think I have Indiana in taking this game. I think you're right that the atmosphere is tough, but I think Indiana's going to be the toughest team that Iowa will have faced up to that point. You mentioned the Iowa State game. Iowa State's a tough team too, but I think Indiana is going to be able, what type of team Iowa has been over the last several years, just not a lot of offense, very heavy defense, and a lot of field position type of game with Iowa as well. I mean, they have a new quarterback in there this year. We talked about Iowa more extensively on our one opponent, one position group podcast, a while back, but I don't think either of us, you Mike, are really totally sold on Mark Gronowski, the quarterback that Iowa added. So I just think that Indiana, their offense is going to be able. I think Indiana will be capable of winning a game that's the type of game that Iowa's going to want to play against them. Iowa's going to want to force them into a low scoring game. Where field position really matters and every point matters, and just try to keep the scoring to a minimum so that, maybe if Iowa can break one big play off, then that could kind of swing the game. But I think Indiana's decently built to win a game like that. I mean, you saw them do it against Michigan last year, win that sort of low scoring game. I'm taking Indiana 23-10 in Iowa City.
Okay. What about you, Owen?
Yep. Still no different results than what other people have said. I think, honestly, in my opinion, kind of going off of what Seth said, I think this has had a chance to be more competitive than that Illinois game. And specifically, I think because if Indiana comes into this game unbeaten and, Iowa has had a respectable performances against Iowa State and some other opponents, the stadium could look just like that picture if you're watching on YouTube. I mean, there's a very good possibility that if Iowa comes out to a hot start and Indiana is also having the success that they're having, it could easily look as full as that looks right there. But for me, I just can't look at Iowa's roster and look at some guys that say, okay, that guy is going to give Indiana problems. That guy is going to be a playmaker for the game. I don't see that in Iowa's roster. And like you guys have discussed, I'm not really sold on their new quarterback. It's just the lack of playmakers that they have on their offensive side, or at least that we haven't been able to see yet, makes me want to give Iowa the win in this case. So I'm going to go 27-21, kind of similar. A very pacey game where Iowa's going to try to slow Indiana down, but I don't think it's going to work. Still a closer game, but Indiana wins and comes away from Iowa City. What would that be? 5-0.
There you go. For me, this is an early defining game for year 2 of the Kurt Signetti era, because year 1 for me on the negative side was defined by Indiana's inability to win big games on the road, specifically at Ohio State, their inability to deal with crowd noise, the offensive line's inability to pick up blitzes and stunts and things of that nature. And that's something Kurt Signetti's been very open about, since the end of the 2024 season. So this game, I think irrespective of where I was at, but certainly if they get off to a good start, I think this is going to be a great environment. It's really going to test Indiana. One thing that makes me optimistic, in addition to the fact that, I think Kurt Signetti and his staff are going to be very they've probably neurotically assessed the situation with the crowd noise, and that they are not going to come in once again unprepared. I mean, he is just that kind of guy. Like, his reputation is a little bit damaged by what happened in those games last year, and he's going to take that very seriously. But also Fernando Mendoza is a guy, unlike Curtis Rourke, he's played power conference college football. He's been in tough road environments before. And I think that's going to, help Indiana in this situation ease into it. And because of that, guys, I am right there with you. We are all at 5-0. I've got Indiana winning this one 31-24 at Kinnick Stadium. And I can tell you, if we're all right and Indiana starts 5-0, this fan base is gonna erupt at this point right here.
Yeah, especially with all the talk about like their scheduling, which is probably that schedule debate will go on for ages and ages. But if they come away with this win, especially if an atmosphere like that happens, you're going to see shades of last year.
Yep. And so whatever they do to this point, they're going to be greeted with a bye week, which I think will be welcome after a couple very tough physical games. And then it's right back out on the road. And it's probably a more difficult road task than what they faced at Iowa City, at least every bit as difficult. Not as big of a stadium, but reputation-wise, one of the toughest places to play in college football. They go out to Oregon for Game 6, October 11th. Oregon will, at least on a preseason measure, be the toughest team Indiana's faced by a pretty wide margin. They are number 7 in both the AP and coaches poll. They are the FPI number 7 team and the SP Plus number 7 team. So a consensus 7 across the board there for the Oregon Ducks. I'll start off with this one. My big question with Oregon is going to be quarterback play. I think it's going to be a situation where they're going to have the home crowd advantage. They've got, they've got a lot of good talent back, although they're it's not like some of these other teams that we're talking about, like Illinois, where it's 70%. There's some rebuilding here. Some skill position players were lost. But really it's going to come down to the quarterback, because they've got a really unproven guy back there. And, I think that could be a defining feature of this game, but I am still going to go with Indiana losing their first game of the season in Eugene by a score of 31-28 Oregon. Owen, what do you got?
I thought you were about to say I'm still going to go with Indiana taking this one. That would have shaken things up a little bit. I was really hoping you would pick a win so we'd have something different, but it pains me because I'm not sold on this team much either. I think Dante Moore has some big shoes to fill. And along with that, they lose Evan Stewart, which is a really dynamic piece, who could miss the entire season as a receiving piece. And it kind of, I think a big game that they have right before they play Indiana is Penn State.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That's a big, big game that could, you talk about like, if they come off a win, they're going to be too relaxed, or they're going to come into this game flat, or if they come up lost, they're going to be fired up and try to kill Indiana out the gate. So, you can look at that however you may please, but it's just Oregon's talent across the board that I think gives Indiana's fits. They always have a really solid offensive line. Their defense has always been dynamic in the past few years. So I think I have the margin a little bit more. I have the Ducks taking this one at home 38-28. However, this is a game that I have circled. And I think Indiana, if they really come out into this game 5-0, clear of any significant injuries, come in with a lot of momentum, fresh off the bye week. This could be a really, really big game for Indiana. I'm giving it to Oregon right now, but watch out for the Hoosiers in this one.
There's no caveats. You picked Oregon, so you're on the record. But Seth, in all seriousness, just a quick sidebar note: that Penn State game that Oregon plays at Penn State, that is on September 27th. So just like Indiana, they're going to have a bye coming into this game as well.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to make about that as well. The Penn State game is going to teach us a lot about Oregon one way or another. And I mean, there's a very real chance that Oregon comes into this game with a loss and Indiana comes in undefeated because I personally think Penn State's better than Oregon, but also that's Penn State's whiteout game, and they have that as a night game for the first time in several years. So I mean, that's going to be as tough a game as Oregon has all season long. But you're right that having a bye week in between there, I think, minimizes the impact of coming off of a game like that for Oregon coming into this. I agree with your concerns about Dante Moore. I think that, I mean, we talked about Oregon plenty, before, and I don't need to get too deep into the weeds. Do make note of the true freshman receiver, DeCorian Moore, who has potential to look like what Jeremiah Smith did for Ohio State last year. On paper, I think, when you compare roster to roster, I mean, Indiana's probably closer to Oregon in terms of personnel than some might realize. Honestly, and this is going to be something that some Indiana fans may not want to hear, but it is a truth in my opinion. I think one of the biggest differences in this matchup is coaching. I think you saw last year, for all the talk about, the crowd noise and everything, that plagued Indiana again, in those couple big games at the end of the year. I think you also saw Curt Cignetti coach his more passive his most passive games coaching wise of the entire season. I think you saw him, this was a team that when they were running up the score on other teams, they would never take their foot off the gas. They would always, be going for it on fourth down, even if they were up by 40 points, and they would, really keep their feet on the other team's necks. And you saw it in these big games. It kind of felt like a shift. Like all of a sudden it wasn't the same aggressive team. They were a little more likely to punt and play it a little more passively just to try to keep the game close. And I mean, look, with Notre Dame, you see it as kind of a talking point now that Indiana only lost that game by 10 points or whatever, because they, scraped 2 touchdowns together late in the game. But I mean, that game was never close. And right. I mean, you can recall watching that game. A lot of that had to do with the lack of aggressiveness. Like we were wondering ourselves in that press box, where is the aggressive team that we saw all season? And coming into a game like this, I would have concerns that Dan Lanning is just going to outfox Curt Cignetti. So I'm taking Oregon 38-30.
Okay, so we're all at 5-1 now.
And 38-30. I mean, there is an early spread there are early spreads on this game too, and Oregon is about a 2 touchdown favorite already with an over under at 55.5. So I mean, all of us seemed like that we have Indiana covering the point spread at Oregon, which it's still a loss, but that's something.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be right there competitive in this game. It's just, when you talk about talent that's, at best equal in a tough road environment, I just think it's going to be difficult to pull it out. I like your point about Cignetti, and something I like about Cignetti is he's honest about this stuff. Like I've heard him say that, they should have gone to a spread offense earlier against Notre Dame. They should have been more aggressive. So all of this stuff is on his radar as well. So we're going to see this tested in these those first 3 games, Illinois, Iowa, and Oregon that we're talking about here. So, that wraps up the first half of the season. And we all have them going 5-1 to start things. They come back to Bloomington for homecoming on October 18th, and they'll welcome Michigan State, who is the FPI number 59 team, the SP Plus number 64 team. This is a team under a second-year coach that Indiana just absolutely pummeled at East Lansing last year, 47-10, and they are in possession of the brass spittoon at the moment, looking to retain that for a second consecutive year. Owen, what do you got this time when the Hoosiers take on Michigan State in Bloomington?
Got it a little closer than last year, but no problems for Indiana. I think it's going to be Aiden Child's development is going to be a big telltale for Michigan State football this season. I mean, case in point, that's pretty obvious when you're looking at that roster, but you're going to pretty much rely heavily on him. And I mean, Nick Marsh is also a really talented guy that they have in Michigan State. That gave Indiana some fits last year, but just again, not enough when I'm looking at Michigan State's roster to really make me believe that they will give Indiana consistent fits throughout an entirety of a game. So I think Indiana takes this one 38-14 inside of Memorial Stadium. Should be a good crowd for homecoming. Yeah.
Seth, what about you?
So there's not already a point spread on this game, but at least based on my prediction here, I'm anticipating that this is the first time that I think Indiana may not cover the spread. I think you look at Michigan State and they have a lot back from last year, and they need to improve offensively if they're going to really be competitive this year. But I like Michigan State's defense a lot. I think even with, as inconsistent and as rough at times as Michigan State looked last season, they still finished 5-7. And I think there's a lot of scenarios where this is a bowl team this year for Michigan State. And, it's a home game. And I guess the other caveat I was going to mention too is, the final scores of games are not always indicative of how close games really are. You could have a game, I mentioned that Notre Dame game for Indiana where they only lost by 10 points, but I mean, that game was never really that competitive where you felt like Indiana was within a puncher's chance of coming back. Once Notre Dame started racking up the points, I mean, it was all Notre Dame there, but just as easily, I mean, you could have a game that's tight look at Indiana's game against Northwestern last year. I think that Northwestern may have been within 7 points, like in the fourth quarter, and Indiana just kind of piled it on at the end. And, so a final score doesn't necessarily indicate how close a game really was. There's just ebbs and flows in football. Anyway, all that said, I'm taking Indiana 31, Michigan State 17.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great point. We do forget that the Northwestern game, even the Maryland game, well into the third quarter was, I think it was tied. I think Hemby scored in that game in the third quarter to tie it at 21, and then Indiana just went crazy from there. But these games can end up being a lot closer than what the final score reflects. I definitely agree with that. I share Owen's concerns with Michigan State about quarterback play. Childs was just very inconsistent. Even in that game against Indiana last year, I think he got off to a great start and then just kind of melted down. And so unless he's improved substantially and can go on the road in what should be a probably a sold out tough environment in Bloomington, and I don't have a lot of faith that he's not going to put some points on the board for the home team in this game. And because of that, I'm predicting Indiana to win comfortably. I've got 45-20. And we've all got 6-1. So we are not mixing this up at all. But there's opportunities to do that still down the road here. I don't think it'll be this one, as Indiana stays home to welcome UCLA. And when they do that, they will welcome back offensive coordinator Tino Sinceri to Bloomington. He took over as the play caller for UCLA. They've got a new quarterback there in Nico. Here we go again. I'm a Leva. Apologies to Nico. But so I think there's some potential here with the new coordinator, new quarterback to turn a corner here. Certainly Tino's going to know what's going on with IU's offense. They've got Jameer Johnson on the other side of the football who could, have some insight into what Indiana's going to try to do defensively. I don't know how much that's ultimately going to help. UCLA, not a ton of talent back from last year. Not the outlook is not real strong. FPI number 51, SP plus number 51. I do think this, for whatever reason, is going to be a game that gets a little weird. There's always one like that. I've got this one circled to be that game. So I did predict UCLA putting a lot of points on the board, and it's kind of a theme in my scores for these predictions. I've said, Seth, in our game, our opponent previews, that I'm a little bit more concerned about Indiana's defense and their offense going into this year. So I'm going to say Indiana wins this one 42-31. What do you got, Seth?
I mean, Nico, could they turn a corner with Nico? Sure. My question is, what corner are they turning with this team? I said before, I'm pretty low on this UCLA team. I think this is one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. Could I see them maybe putting up a few more points against Indiana than some other teams have? Sure, but I do not think Indiana is going to have any trouble in this game. Give me 49-26, Indiana.
Got it. What about you, Owen?
I'm going to be a little bit more on the kinder side. It's pretty much Nico takes the world with this UCLA team. Seth, I wanted to point out a point you made about the Oregon team with this UCLA team. Along with the lack of talent they really have, I think this is a huge, huge margin in terms of coaching that Indiana will have a big advantage in. I'm just not set on giving UCLA like any types of advantages that could catch IU off guard at any chance. I have it as a little bit of a closer margin. I have it 35-21. I think UCLA gets a few lucky scores here and there, but I can't see Indiana, losing this game.
Okay. So everybody is now 7-1 and going into the back third of the season. It's kind of an interesting schedule the way it sets up. You got the 3 really difficult games in a row with Illinois, Iowa, and Oregon, followed by 3 games that I think Indiana is going to be widely expected to win, at least based on what we know now, with home games against Michigan State, UCLA, and then they go to Maryland. And Seth, we've talked about Maryland. It's Mike Loxley there had everything going a couple years ago, but the trend line is not very favorable, and now they're going to be playing a quarterback. Who knows who will be the quarterback by this point in game 9, but in any event, it's not going to be a proven commodity at quarterback. The Terps come into the season ranked FPI number 61, SP plus number 70. So they're kind of thought to be, towards the bottom third, bottom quarter of the Big Ten. And I don't think Indiana is going to have much of a challenge out there. This is typically not a real daunting road environment. It obviously could be if Maryland surprises on the upside, but it's also quite possible that this is a pretty timid road game for Indiana. I've got them winning comfortably out there, 45-14. What about you, Owen? Or Seth, if you're ready? I saw you ready to jump in there, so go ahead.
Seth, I'll let you have it.
I said this on our podcast about Maryland before. I mean, forget, who's going to be the quarterback. Maryland's coming off of a bye in this game, and they play UCLA right before that. If that UCLA game goes poorly for Maryland, let's see who the head coach even is for Maryland. Because I am not 100% convinced that Loxley could make it past Halloween. We'll have to see. Yeah, you're right that this is not typically ranked towards the top end of Big Ten atmospheres. And frankly, I mean, there's potential for it to almost feel like a home game for Indiana because, I mean, it might be easy for non-East Coasters to remember, but I mean, College Park is right next to Washington, D.C., and there's enough of a Hoosier alumni base in Washington, D.C. that if Maryland fans are not showing up in droves to support what's supposed to be a disappointing team, I mean, it could even feel like a bit of a home game for Indiana. So I agree. I think this is going to be a rout. I think maybe the biggest route. It could be the biggest route of Big Ten season. It's one of the biggest routes of Big Ten season for Indiana. I'm going IU 45, Maryland 13.
Okay, so we're 1 point off there. What do you got, Owen?
One score off for me, 45-10 in favor of Indiana. Maryland's gonna struggle. And Seth, I honestly didn't even think about the Loxley thing until you mentioned it, but that is a very, very, it's a potential thing that we could see come this time. So it's just Maryland's just going to struggle in this game. I do agree that Indiana could have a good traveling crowd and could certainly make this feel like a home game. My inner meteorologist is also saying that this could be an interesting weather game as well, with it being at the beginning of November. So that's something to look forward to. But Indiana has no problems with this one. 45-10 favor the Hoosiers.
Wow, that's a pretty damning consensus against the Terps. All right. Road Big Ten games don't go that way typically, but I think we all kind of have a less than favorable outlook for Maryland in 2025. Indiana will then pivot to what could be the game of the year for the Hoosiers. Seth, we talked about this recently, has the potential to have the magnitude that Indiana at Ohio State had last year. If we're all right to this point and IU is 8-1 going into this game, it almost certainly will have that feel. As I've said, Indiana's never won in this stadium, and Penn State has, probably got their rosiest outlook they've had in quite some time, even though they've been, a legit national power for decades. But right now they are number 2 in the AP, number 3 in the coaches poll. They are number 5 in FPI and number 3 in SP Plus. So consensus top 5 team playing at home in front of 100,000. We'll have to see what television does with this game. If it ends up being a night game, if Penn State does a stripe out, or how they go about handling it. But no matter what, this is going to be a very, very difficult game for Indiana. In my opinion, the most difficult game on the schedule. But I don't think Indiana is going to walk into this and be unable to compete. You think back to last year with the game at Ohio State, as we've talked about ad nauseum, that game was 7-7 right before halftime. And if James Evans doesn't drop a punt, they probably go into halftime tied, and maybe the whole outlook changes. At Notre Dame, if not for a 98-yard run right off a Curtis Work interception, maybe that game goes totally different. So those are a lot of ifs and buts. But, I think, just based on what we know about these two teams, Indiana can go out there and be competitive. I'm just going to say they come up short in a close game, 31-24 Penn State. What do you got, Owen?
All right. So if those have been paying attention to my bold and not so bold predictions this year, I had initially had Indiana at 10-2. I honestly, no, I'm not honestly. I sometimes lose sleep over this because I'm not fully sold on Drew Auer. I'm sorry, but I'm just looking at some of his big games. At Ohio State, no touchdowns, 1 interception, 12 of 20. In that Notre Dame game, no touchdowns, 1 interceptions, 12 of 23. Illinois, he didn't throw a touchdown or an interception. He went 15 of 21. I'm going to go Indiana here. I am going to go Indiana wins a very, very, very good game and a very highly competitive game. 31-28. I am deviating from my prediction that I made earlier on in the summer. Obviously, that running back room that Penn State has is scary. and it is a very daunting task for Indiana to contain with Singleton and Katron Allen. But if they can find a way to contain that, and Penn State made some upgrades at wide receiver this year, but not enough to make me think that it's going to be a ton better to what Aller had with this year. They lose Tyler Warren, which is a huge weapon for that offense. The crowd is going to be the crowd's going to be loud, but I think this is where we see Indiana kind of make that statement that this is a team that's going to, if they can sustain this over years, this is going to be a team that competes in the Big Ten for years and years to come. I'm going to go Indiana here. I'm deviating from my original prediction. Give me the Hoosiers.
If we were a sophisticated podcast, I'd have a siren sound right now. So we've officially diverged from one another in terms of our predictions, and we'll see how Seth goes one way or the other here. Seth, what do you got?
How dare you call this an unsophisticated podcast?
I wasn't referring to my guest. I was referring to the host.
Well, I guess important to lead with another game that has an early point spread available, and Penn State is a 16.5 point favorite early on, over under 52.5. And I mean, I think Penn State, this roster is the class of the Big Ten this year. I think top to bottom, they're loaded. I think, the biggest question to me with Penn State, going deep into the season beyond Indiana is, I still don't know how much I fully trust James Franklin when you get into the playoffs or, big game moments. But I think there's just too much talent on this Penn State roster, even compared to a strong Indiana roster. Specifically, I'm going to look at one matchup here. I like Indiana's offensive line. I think there's a lot of potential there. I think it's a total mismatch for that offensive line against Penn State's defensive front. I think Penn State might swallow them up and make life for Fernando Mendoza and the running backs really difficult. I don't know that this game is all that close to, it may not feel all that close, frankly. I'm going Penn State 35, Indiana 17.
Yeah, and as we talked about to that point about the offensive line, it's the exact same defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, who swallowed up Indiana's offensive line in Ohio Stadium last year. So that certainly is a concern for me as well. So we've officially got one outlier at 9-1, and two of us at 8-2 as we go back to Bloomington here. And this game, game 11 at home against Wisconsin. We've talked a little bit about the Badgers. They've got Luke Fickell, who's probably on the hot seat this year. They've got an unbelievably challenging schedule. Who knows what kind of situation they will be in by the time this game rolls around. But I do, the more I've looked at them, I am impressed by the talent that they've got back. I think they can trend favorably. I just don't know if it's going to show up in their record because of how challenging their schedule is. It's the most difficult schedule in the Big Ten, at least coming into this season. They are FPI number 40. They are SP plus number 37. I think, all things being equal, like if this game was played earlier in the season and we could kind of know what we know now about both teams, I would say Wisconsin's going to give Indiana a really stern test, and that's why I'm predicting Indiana to win, but by a relatively close margin, 34-20. What do you got, Owen?
Yeah, obviously I initially had Penn State beating IU for my original prediction, but so I was initially going to say IU is going to treat this as like a bounce back and just clean house with Wisconsin. I think it's a little bit closer than that though. I have 31-17 in favor of Indiana. I think right now, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but Billy Edwards is trending to have that starting spot in Wisconsin. And and they have that heavy transfer class as well. A lot of transfers in to Wisconsin. But again, I'll just echo this that I've done a lot. I just can't look at Wisconsin and say that this guy or that guy is going to give Indiana problems. And Billy Edwards really struggled against Indiana and the crowd noise that Indiana brought last season. Then again, it was kind of like a raining sleet that game, but still, I mean, Indiana's crowd had its way with Billy Edwards. So I think 31-17 is where I'm going with in Indiana. If they were to lose that Penn State game, get to bounce back. But in my eyes, they continue to go 10-1.
Oh, you're making me question your meteorological skills now. It was definitely not sleeting in September in Bloomington. But...
No, not sleet. Just a misty rain. Misty rain. That's the best I could give.
There you go. What do you got, Seth?
Sleet. Good God. So
hey, you never know in Indiana. It could happen.
Do you want to bet? So look, Mike, you mentioned the UCLA game as one you kind of circled that could get a little weird. I think I've got this one circled as one that could get a little weird. I think Wisconsin, as you said, and as we said on our podcast recently, I mean, they've got a really brutal schedule in Big Ten play. I mean, it looks like it's even harder than the draws Indiana would get when they were in the Big Ten East. I mean, it's really crazy how difficult Wisconsin's schedule is. And I think just maybe that combined with, a lackluster few years for Wisconsin might have people just generally sleeping on the Badgers this year. I don't think they're that strong of a team. I'm not saying they're going to be, a Big Ten contender by any means, but I mean, they might have they have one of the best offensive lines in the Big Ten, and their defense is really strong. And I think, those two things, I think Indiana's going to win this game, but I think Wisconsin's got the type of team that can, put a lot of pressure on Indiana and make them close and put them in some pressure spots where, the game could go either way. So I'm saying Indiana wins. I mean, you all said that you were having it, closer margins. I mean, I have it by a close margin. I'm saying Indiana wins 27-22.
Ooh, okay. That is close.
Getting closer every time.
Yeah, the other wild card there is just how Indiana's doing coming off the Penn State game. They could be really high if Owen's right. They could be, it could be like a third or fourth loss where they just feel down and out. So that there's so many variables when you get to that point in the season. And that leaves us with the final game of the regular season, and that will be at Ross-Ade Stadium for the first Old Oaken Bucket game of the Barry Odom era. And it is a Friday night game, the first night game of the series at Ross-Ade, the first ever night game, the second night game in a row in the series. Last year in Bloomington was also a night game. So it seems like a new trend that's starting in this series. Seth, what do you see here? I mean, obviously we're talking game 12, so we are well into the season. A lot can play out, but just giving you the numbers here: FPI number 96, SP plus number 101. Those are the worst in the Big Ten, but oh, by the way, those were pretty much Indiana's numbers last year. So you never know. You got a new coaching staff. You got a lot of continuity from both the staff and the players that he brought over from UNLV. So that there's certainly some things that bring to mind Indiana last year, but I don't see that whatsoever. What about you?
Well, first off, good job not calling him Ryan Odom.
I learned.
There's not a whole lot to say about Purdue. I think long term, I like the hire. I think I like the hire long term. I think it's unrealistic to expect a game that was quite as lopsided as last year's was, just because even with a total mismatch of teams, so much has to happen for a game, 66-0 for a final score like that to happen. There's just so much, a lot of good fortune and a lot of things going your way. And this is on the road. And no matter how rough the season had gone up to that point for Purdue. It's the first year for Barry Odom. It's the first Old Oak and Bucket rivalry game he's going to play in. No matter where Purdue is at that point, he's going to have his team fired up. The crowd will be fired up for the game just because it's Indiana. That said, Indiana 48, Purdue 7.
Okay. What about you, Owen?
1 point off, 49-7. I'm giving Purdue the benefit of a touchdown this year. And to kind of echo off of what Seth's saying, I think this could be a pretty good rivalry in a few years. I think long term, when you think of Barry Odom and how he developed UNLV, and if he brings that kind of thing to Purdue, I think this could be a really, really like solid rivalry where, you know, maybe Indiana still has the edge in the next few years, but Purdue could at least give them like fits, or could at least take the game to the fourth quarter or all the way to the end. This is not the year that happens, and Purdue or Indiana comes away with this one with no fits.
Yeah, I while I mentioned, there's staff continuity and player continuity, it's not to the extent that Indiana had last year. Indiana brought some real stars over from James Madison. They also, the guys that they got from the portal from other schools were, guys with some serious proven production at the college level. And I don't think Purdue has much of that. Their returning production numbers certainly don't reflect that. I think, it'll be a little bit closer than what you guys say, just because of the rivalry aspect, because Odom's a good coach, because it's at Purdue. I've got Indiana winning 38-14, but I think unless there's something weird going on at this stage of the season with the injuries or whatnot, I think this will be a pretty comfortable win for IU. And so that leaves us, Owen, do I have you right? You're going 11-1 for year 2 of the Signetti era.
I am. Hey, I might as well. It's potentially my last semester of school, so why not go out with a bang? We'll see.
So this is a very selfish prediction, is what you're saying.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And Seth,
we'll call it that.
Seth, you and I have 10-2. It kind of has gone how I anticipated. I feel like we are all overcorrecting a little bit. I certainly won't be stunned by a 9-3 season. I've had people ask me what I think the floor for this season is. I've said 8-4. I can't imagine them going worse than that, unless like Mendoza got hurt like week 1 or something crazy like that. But I guess the question to wrap it up for you guys as we hit about an hour on this, which was what I was targeting, is, I think obviously if Owen's right, I don't think there's any question this is a college football playoff team. Seth, if we're right, they go 10-2. Their losses are at Oregon and at Penn State. What chance would you give Indiana to return to the CFP in 2025?
A lot of that obviously has to, once you go 10-2, your hands are just as much in the fate of other teams and how they perform as much as the committee and how they view you. I do not think that 10-2 would get them back into the playoffs, because I just think people, especially if they don't, 10-2 could, if you go 10-2, if you're Indiana, I think at least one of those wins has to be Oregon or Penn State if you're going to get into the playoffs. I don't think that a 10-2 season where your best win is Illinois and Iowa, I don't think that's going to be enough for Indiana to get back into the field. I think it would get them in a, very strong, highly rated non-playoff bowl game. And obviously, it would be a highly successful season, and Curt Cignetti would, it would be pretty unprecedented territory to have back-to-back double-digit win seasons at Indiana. But and it wouldn't shock me if Indiana's able to get into the playoffs. I don't think I'm not saying, oh, this is definitely not a playoff team, but based on the predictions we just made and based on how I see the season shaking out, no, I do not think Indiana gets back to the playoff.
Yeah, I think they're going to need teams like Illinois and Iowa to be good, be ranked. I mean, part of what challenged them last year is that their schedule didn't end up being nearly as tough as it looked on paper at this point last year, with Michigan and Washington and Nebraska of note not really panning out to the extent people thought that they might. And so I think, they're going to need ranked wins. I mean, look, this narrative nationally is stacked against Indiana, in my opinion. Like, they were 11-1 last year, and there was a lot of people trying to talk them out of the CFP. If they are 10-2 and they don't have a couple quality wins, I agree with you, Seth. I think it's going to be easier for people to leave them out than to include them. So I think they're going to need some help. If our scenario is right, I think they're going to need those Illinois and Iowa wins to be quality wins, because I don't see any of the other teams like Michigan State, UCLA, Maryland, Wisconsin, Purdue, like those teams aren't really going to help Indiana. Those are going to fall right into the same category as last year's schedule, where it's, who cares? They were, 4-8, congratulations. You didn't beat anybody once again. So, I think, I've said every time I've had this conversation with people, I said it's 4 games. You circle them. It's Illinois, Iowa, Oregon, Penn State. I think the other games aren't really much of a question, and they might need to. Owen might need to be right here. They might need to go 11-1 to get back in the CFP. But there's obviously a ton to play out, and we start on Saturday.
Yeah. And the 10-2 conversation also gets pretty dicey with what Seth mentioned, excuse me. If they win like a game like that against Oregon or Penn State, but who do they drop that game to? Like who does that loss come across to? So that's just even more stacked against them, because like you said, it has the favorability to get them into a really good playoff conversation if they go 10-2 with a win against Penn State or Oregon. But who does that loss come against, and how much does that knock them down?
Right.
So that's something that a lot of people are going to go nuts over if a situation like that happens.
Well, if we've learned nothing else, people love to get nuts about IU football. So it's made the whole process and conversation fun over the last year. And I think we're all predicting that this season is going to be fun one way or another, and we're going to have some relevant football in November. But for now, I think we can wrap this up. Thanks, guys. He is Owen Graham. He is Seth Tao. I am Mike Schumann for East 17th Street and the Daily Hoosier. We'll catch you all on the other side, being the start of the season next week. Talk to you guys later.